First, I forgot to turn off lock camera to view in the last video, so I'll turn that off. Now we'll go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and search for Tree. And we'll turn on Add Curve Sapling Tree Gen. We'll hit Shift A, Add Curve Sapling Tree Gen, which will show up in the center, so we can go to the wireframe view to see it. We can go to Load Preset, Small Maple. As you can see, it looks kind of similar to the trees in the background. So I can go to Leaves. And I'll increase the leaves to about 150. And I'll turn on Show Leaves. And then we're good. Next, I'll go to the leaves, add a material. I'll use the ice material. But I'll click this 4 to duplicate it. And I want it to be kind of like a dark orangish to kind of match with the leaves on the background ones. That looks like it won't be too bad. Next, I'll go to the main part of the tree. I'll hit Control A to apply the visual geometry to mesh, which will convert it from curves to mesh. I'll add a new material, which I'll call bark. And I'll shift select the leaves and hit Control J to join those two. And I'll hit F2 and rename it tree. I'll put it maybe here or so. Make sure it's in the ground. And then I'll select the bark material and go to the shading tab. I'll hit Control Space to make this bigger. And I'll change from the world to the object so that I can work on the bark material. I'll click on the Principled BSDF, and with Node Wrangler enabled, I'll use Control-Shift-T to set it up automatically. I use the Bark Brown 02 texture from Textures Haven. Link should be in the description. I use the diffuse, the roughness, and the normal map. Alright, so I'll change the flat to box projection on each of these. And then I'll use a blend of about 0.2 on each of them. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get close. And I'll use the object in this mapping here. Now we got bark. Now it'd be cool if we can add snow to the top of this. So if I go to Control Space, I can go into the snow texture, and I can just select all of this, hit Control C to copy, and go back to my bark. I can paste it in to my bark, and I'll put it at the bottom. Next, I'll use a mix shader node. And then I'll mix these two shaders. And then I'll use the normals to put the snow on the top for the factor. So I'm going to go and search for geometry, which has the meshes normal. And then I'll search for vector math. I'll use normal in one of them. And then I'll use an up vector, which is 0, 0, 1 on the other. And I'll change this to dot product. And if I put that in the factor and hit Control Space to zoom out and take a preview, you should have the snow at the top. Now I can maybe make it a little stronger by searching for math and choosing power. And that should increase the strength a little. Now if I go to the layout tab, I can press Alt D to make link duplicates and make a bunch of them. I can rotate on the Z a little, maybe scale it a little. And scale, rotate Z. Is this one in the ground? Okay, yeah, it is. And then just duplicate this a bunch of times. Then do a layered approach, trying to get it at different positions so that if I go to 0, it tries to fill in the area as much as possible. And that should be pretty good. Next, let's add some rocks. So shift right click here, add a cube, hit F2 and call it rock. I'll hit M to move this into my main collection. I'll hit Control 3 to subdivide it. And then I can apply this subdivision, maybe scale it in a certain way to make it not a perfect sphere. And then I can add a displace modifier. I'll just use the high frequency and maybe lower the strength a little. I'll hit shade smooth. And this can be our shape for our rock. I'll add a material. I'm just going to use the bark material for now, which I'll hit this 3 to duplicate. And then I'll turn it into a rock material after renaming. I'll go to shading. And then this top one is our bark, so I'll zoom in and delete this. And I'll click on the principled BSDF, hit Control-Shift-T. I use the Rock 04 textures from texturehaven.com. I use the diffuse, the roughness, and the normal map. Now, like before, I'm going to go and change it from flat to box on each of these. And do 0.2. Speaking of that, I should probably do that here as well. Then maybe I'll try using this one and hopefully it'll work well. With Alt right click, I can use this thing to quickly place these automatically into our nodes. And I'll set it to object. If I hit Control Space, it should hopefully be nice. I think we should also go to the trees, and on their bark texture, also do that with the snow here. Okay. So now we can go back to our rock. We can maybe zoom in here and move the rock over this way some. And maybe hit Alt D, press RR to rotate the rock, scale it down, Alt D, RR, maybe scale it down even more maybe. Cool. Now, I think maybe it would be nice to have a slightly different color to the rocks since they're all next to each other. I think it's pretty noticeable that they're the same color. So what we can do is we can go and hit Shift A, search for object info, and we've got this little random guy, which we can use with a mix RGB. Put the random in the factor, put the color into the texture's color. Then we'll modify that texture with a hue saturation value node, which we can plug the color into here. Then we can just plug this color into there and plug that into the base color. So if I hit Control Space to zoom out, you should see nothing happen since I haven't adjusted it. But if I change the value down a little, you'll see that some of them are a little darker. Maybe I can adjust the saturation a little. And maybe just ever so slightly lower the hue, like 0.47. Maybe even more, 0.45. And now the rocks are slightly different colored. Maybe it'd be cool to hit Alt-D and try to get a different one. Yeah, let's get one of these more slightly purplish almost rocks. Hit RR to rotate. And yeah, something like that would be cool. Next, let's add some details to the door and maybe add some lanterns on the sides of it. So I'm going to make this door flush against, or close to flush against this frame so that we can have the hinges look nice. So I'll shift right click about here to add a hinge in the middle. I'll use a cube. Tabbing to edit mode, scale it down. Now right now I got the correct face attributes enabled, so that should help. So that should help to make sure our UVs are nice. I'll add a new material which I'll call metal. Make it darker. And I'll make it metallic. I'll then lower the roughness, but actually I'll use a texture. So I'll go to shading. Now I'll hit Shift A to search for an image texture. Now I'm going to use this grunge texture that I got from Blender Cloud. You can use any one that you find online. It doesn't really matter too much. I think I'm technically allowed to share it with you, but it is a paid texture, so I'm not sure. But I'm using one that looks kind of like this, so anyone you find online should work fine. I'll just search for a color ramp. Plug the color of the grunge texture into the color ramp and the color ramp into the roughness. Now I'm going to make these like a dark gray and a slightly. Click on this one and make this one slightly less dark gray. Maybe make this a little darker. So this means that it's pretty smooth, but should have little bits of imperfections. You don't even really need to use the grunge texture since it won't be that noticeable in the final render, but if you want to, you can. Maybe it needs to be just a little bit more different. And a little bit more of a rough color, so a little bit brighter. I think that's a little better. I'll tab into edit mode, scale it down a little. So I'm going to hit F2 and call this door hinge. I'll hit M to move it to my main collection. I'll add a modifier, bevel, 0.005, gives just a little bit. I'll use shading, harden normals, But to do that, I'll need to right click, shade smooth, and use this data tab, normals auto smooth. Then I can hit Shift D and I can move this over here, which I'll hit F2 and call lantern. And then Shift D again, and I'll move this over here, and I'll hit F2 and call this one doorknob. Now tabbing to edit mode, scale it down a little. Move it over here a little. I'll drag this face over. I'll hit Control R and add a loop in the middle. Drag that out. I'll hit Shift D, drag this one up, and I'll press 1 to go into vertex mode, go into the wireframe, and then drag this over a little. And I'll hit Shift D and drag another one down there. Okay, so now I'll move this one here, which will be our doorknob. Place it about here maybe, or maybe actually it should be a little lower, I think, than the center. Tab into edit mode, maybe scale it up a little. Hit Shift S to use the cursor to selected, and hit Shift A, torus. Now you can scale this down with S, rotate Y, and then hold down Control, which will let you snap the rotation into increments. And I'll get it at 90 degrees. I'll drag it up, scale it down a little more, drag it down here. I'll press 3 to go into phase selection. Hit I to inset. Maybe scale on the Z a little bit, and hit E to extrude. Press L to link select this torus and drag it in here. And I don't think this is actually even showing up in our camera right now, but if it shows up in your camera, that should be good. You can maybe add a little bit more detail if you want. Now let's get to our lantern. So we'll drag this against the wall. Tabbing to edit mode, scale up a little bit. Maybe more in the general direction. I'll hit Shift S, cursor to selected. Shift A, cylinder. We'll use 32 vertices. Scale it down. Maybe something like that. Drag it out. I'll make the bottom one a little smaller. Maybe bring it down a little. Right click, shade smooth. On both the doorknob and our lantern, let's change the bevel limit method to angle. Then we can maybe scale this down a little. Scale this one down a little more. Hit E, right click to cancel, scale it up. Maybe we could drag it up just a little bit. Hit E. Press I to inset. Maybe E again. Maybe I to inset again. Maybe extrude once more. And at the bottom we can hit E to extrude. Bring it down just a little bit. Hit S to scale. And E to extrude once more. And maybe even scale that one down a little too. Now let's try to grab some faces. We'll grab this one. Go and get 6 of these. So Control Shift click to grab all 6 of these. Skip 2. Shift click. Yeah. You can press slash to isolate, which should make it a little easier to see. Control Shift click on the 6th one. Shift click after skipping 2. Control shift click on the 6th one. Shift click after skipping 2. And then control shift click after the 6th one. And then hit E to extrude, right click to cancel the movement, and press scale shift Z to scale it on the X and Y axis. And then we can go to our materials and add a new one. Assign. This one can use an emission shader, and we'll use the black body as our color. Black body just converts color temperature into a color. And we'll use the default temperature of 1500 for now. You can press slash again to unisolate. Now we can maybe add a little curve going in between here and that. So we're tabbing to edit mode, hit L to link select that and drag this down. We'll click on this face, I to inset it, scale on Z, drag up, scale on Y. We'll hit Shift D to duplicate it, and we'll hit P to separate by selection. And then in this separate one, we can get rid of the modifier, tabbing to edit mode, hit E to extrude, and then hit Shift Y to not move on the Y axis. E, Shift Y, E, Shift Y, E, Shift Y, E, Shift Y, E, Shift Y. Now I can add a subdivision surface modifier. And then I can tab back into edit mode and adjust this. I'll tab into edit mode on the lantern. Maybe scale this down a little more and hit E to extrude. I'll tap back into this. Maybe drag this up a little bit more to make it straighter on that peg. Maybe press 3 and grab this face and bring it up. Then I'll bring the levels viewport of the subdivision surface up a level. And then I'll go into edge selection mode and alt left click here, alt left click on this edge loop, and then shift click on the last edges here, and hit Shift E and scale up, which will sharpen the subdivision surface so it's not round at the ends. Then we can just add a solidify modifier, and we'll go with a thickness of 0.005 or half a centimeter. And maybe I'll add a little peg here too. So I'll press 3, I to inset, and E to extrude. I'll hit GZ on this to move it up a little so that's not intersecting with this. And then I can hit Control A over both of these modifiers to apply both of them. And then shift left click on the lantern and hit Control J to join them. And we got our first lantern. We can hit Alt D to duplicate this lantern and move it on the Y axis over here. Maybe I'll move this over here a little more. Something like that should be good. Save, and now we're done. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to see more videos like this and see the rest of the series. Thank you.